The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. Book review. Some books you read and, well, some books you don't so much read as struggle through. I recently read Faulkner's short story, A Rose for Emily, in On Writing Short Stories collection. And A Rose for Emily was pretty readable. So I thought to myself, hey, this Faulkner guy's not so difficult after all. This is pretty easy to read. Before that, I had been aware of Faulkner's reputation as somebody who was a difficult author to understand, and that had kind of scared me away from him. But after reading A Rose for Emily and finding it very straightforward, I thought I could do this. But The Sound and the Fury is anything but straightforward. I think this is the most difficult book I've read since I had to read James Joyce for my college literature class. The book is divided into 4 sections. The first 3 sections are different narrators, 3 different narrators going over the same events in Rashomon-like style. The first section is narrated by Benjamin. Now, Benjamin is a mentally retarded brother, mentally impaired brother, I guess you would say. Now, what makes this book difficult is nobody kind of tells you this. The narrator doesn't say, okay, now Benjamin's a little bit mentally impaired, so this is not going to make sense. You gradually have to figure it out. So it's very difficult to make sense of. Benjamin has the inability to stay focused on one moment in time, so his brain kind of switches between a lot of different events all at once. And he can only kind of remember events, but he can't understand their significance. So nothing is ever explained as to why it's significant. This section of the book, maybe this is comparing apples and oranges, but it reminded me of that Christopher Nolan movie, Memento. Everything is shown out of order. At first, you have no idea what's happening, but if you stick with it, and if you can resist the urge to throw the book across the room, eventually the pieces do start to come together, and then you can kind of make sense of the story. But if I had to do it all over again, I would have gotten a copy of the Cliff Notes before I even started this book. Unless you like a real intellectual workout. And then you can, struggle through it on your own. But if you want the book to make sense at all, then you should really read it with the Cliff Notes. Because nothing is explained. The reader is not explained that Benjamin is mentally impaired and can't grasp the significance of events, and his mind is kind of jumping all over. The reader just has to kind of figure this out as you're reading what's going on. Now, to add to the confusion, there are 3 different characters that have the same name, and one of them, if memory serves, it's Benjamin, has his name changed halfway through. So kind of in older flashbacks, he was referred to as one name, and then in the more recent flashbacks, he's referred to by another name. And again, nobody tells you this at the beginning of the book. This is something you just gradually have to piece together as you're reading it. Faulkner is just really making this as difficult to get through as he can. It's one of those authors who likes to challenge the reader. Second chapter is the second brother, Quentin. Now, Quentin is even more difficult. Benjamin may jump around in time, but at least his narrative is straightforward. Quentin also goes in and out of time, but Quentin thinks about the past in a stream of consciousness type way, which jumbles diverse ideas and images together. And he's obsessed with his sister. So there's a lot of Freudian ideas about incest being thrown in this part. Now, if you haven't given up on the book yet, and you can somehow make it to the third brother, then this is where things finally start to make sense. The third brother, Jason, tells everything pretty much straightforward. Now, Jason's a jerk. He's one of those literary characters that's interesting because you love to hate him so much, so it's fun to read. And then the fourth section is just very straightforward. It's just standard third-person omniscient narrative. Ugh. Very straightforward. It's almost as if Faulkner is rewarding you. He's saying, okay, you've made it through all those hard to understand parts. Now this last part is just going to be nice and easy to understand, straightforward story. The book, for all its struggles, can be interesting at parts. And the dialogue is interesting. You know, it takes place in the South. So it's got kind of all these... this dialogue which has a certain charm to it, or which kind of, you know, you read it and you kind of want to say it out loud just to see how it sounds. Like this one struck me. Once a bitch, always a bitch, what I say. I thought that was fun. But unless you really like struggling with a book, and you know, maybe you do, but unless you want the struggle, get the Cliff Notes before you start reading this, or have some sort of study guide next to you while you're reading this book.